Hey, so sorry this is a little bit late. I could blame it on a few days where I was not feeling too well, but I also should probably admit that I have been choosing to just play so much Mario Kart. It's been such a wonderful escape. Hi, I'm Tiffany. Welcome to Towering TBR. This is my absolute favorite video to film. I get to gush about all of the best books I read this year. And if you're new, you will get a really good sense of the wide variety of books that I read. I'm going to be talking about 12. This is a combination of fiction, nonfiction, and poetry. The other thing I think you should know is I get frequent migraines, which means I use audiobooks as accommodations. And I will definitely give you all of the audiobook details if I found it noteworthy. Enough preamble, let's just get right into it. At number 12, Matchmaking for Psychopaths by Tasha Coriel. This book really surprised me. I picked it up with zero expectations, and it was such a bonkers ride. It is a darkly humorous thriller that I couldn't put down. So we are following Lexi, and she is just having the worst day ever. She arrives at a restaurant meeting her boyfriend and her best friend for what she thinks is a birthday dinner. But they didn't remember it was her birthday. In fact, they set this meeting up to let her know that they have been having an affair and that they are both respectively dumping her. It completely blindsides her. She thought he was going to propose. She's distraught, but decides to throw herself into her work. She works at Better Love, which is a matchmaking app, and she specifically matchmakes psychopaths. We learn she has a very warped sense of romance because of the terrible precedent her parents set. She decides not to tell anybody that she's been dumped. It will hurt her credibility as a matchmaker. She's determined to find an even better boyfriend and a new best friend. But when her ex-boyfriend shows up dead, it looks like someone might be framing her for murder. She races to solve the crime to clear her name. There were so many twists and turns. The ending just left me breathless. It's a bit unhinged and gets pretty dark, so check trigger warnings if you need. At number 11, I'm putting The Labyrinth of Lost and Found by Jordan Lees. This was a wonderful middle grade fantasy. The book starts off with Edward's story. In the opening scene, he can hear a voice from a crack in the wall. When I thought of the crack in the wall, I immediately thought of Doctor Who and this. The voice asks Edward for help, and he is tricked and disappears. We then go to an alternate reality, aka the real world, where Edward's story is just that. It's a story in a book. We are following young Benjamiah. He is a bookish boy who does not believe in magic. He prides himself on his desire for logic and facts, basically trying to imitate his mother, who is a scientist. But one day he receives a creepy doll called a poppet. The poppet takes a form of a bird and opens a magical door into Wreathen World, the very world where Edward went missing. In this book, everybody has poppets. If you've read Philip Pullman's His Dark Materials, it's very similar to like the demons. He is unsure on how to navigate this labyrinth of a city, which holds many secrets. He is rescued by Edward's father, Hansel, who takes him home. He teams up with Elizabella, Edward's sister, who is fervently looking for her missing brother. They are on a quest to find the missing boy and to find a way for Ben to go back to his world. The journey is dangerous and fraught with perils. The writing is beautifully atmospheric, sometimes bordering on creepy. The plot is fast-paced, and it has some of the very best world building I've ever seen in a middle grade fantasy. I'd like to share a quote that I really thought summed up kind of the theme of the book. And this is Hansel talking to Benjamiah. I've never met a reader who wasn't special in one way or another. When you read, you connect with the world. You connect with the world as it once was, as it is, and as it one day might be. We are only dust, brief moments of ether. To read, to be curious, is the most astonishing kind of magic. This was exactly what I needed to read at this time. It was so uplifting and heartwarming and had a huge emphasis on the importance of stories. This was the first of a trilogy. I am very excited to get to book 2 and eventually book 3, which comes out this year. At number 10, I loved Hogfather by Terry Pratchett. Now, this is my 5th Discworld book, but it is my absolute favorite of the 5 I've read so far. It was so delightful. I'm going to make this into a Christmas tradition and reread it. I think it'll be even better on a reread. So, the Hogfather is kind of a mythical being in Discworld, similar to Santa. Something has happened to him, and so Death and his granddaughter Susan team up to help save Hogmas. There are several memorable characters, including an assassin called Tea Time, who is just the most wonderful villain. The Oh God of Hangovers, which provided lots of comedic relief. Susan, who I mentioned is Death's granddaughter, but she is also a badass governess who knows how to wield a poker. And then there is Death himself, stepping into a new role. On the surface, it just seems like it is a silly fantasy story, but there are so many layers. The book is incredibly class conscious and frequently points out the disparities between the rich and the poor. Death has so many great lines. On top of that, it gets philosophical on the nature of humanity and the importance of fantasy. I love this so much. If you're a Discworld expert, can you tell me what I missed with the bananas and fish line? I feel like I probably need to read a book to understand that, but if you understand it, definitely let me know in the comments. The audiobook is fabulous. We get 3 narrators. Death is absolutely sublime, voiced by Peter Serafinowicz. He just embodies death so well. The other 2 narrators, Bill Nighy and Sean Clifford, also do a really good job. I gave this one of my rare 5-star ratings for audiobooks, which means I think that this is the absolute best way to experience the story. At number 9, I have my only nonfiction on this list, Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. This was one of my most anticipated books. So this is a short book detailing John going to Sierra Leone and meeting a young man called Henry. Henry has treatment-resistant tuberculosis. I had always thought of tuberculosis as kind of like an old-timey illness that we have a cure now, and I didn't really think of it as a modern-day problem. He quickly got me up to speed. There are over 1 million people every year dying from tuberculosis, not because we don't have the cure, but because poorer countries cannot afford it. He also talks about the impact tuberculosis had on pop culture and on society, and other people's attitudes towards the sick. While this is not a comprehensive look on tuberculosis, it definitely whet my appetite, and I have added quite a few books so that I can learn even more. I loved the audiobook. John Green narrates it himself, and you can hear in his voice the passion he has for this cause. I did do a single review, so if you want some more details, I will link that in the cards and in the description below. At number 8, I'm putting Scarlet Morning by N.D. Stevenson. N.D. Stevenson wrote and illustrated my absolute favorite graphic novel, Nimona, and I was really excited he had a new book coming out this year. While this is not a graphic novel, it does include pictures. It is a middle grade fantasy following Wilmer and Viola. They are 2 kids living on an incredibly inhospitable, salty island. And they mostly just live through books, waiting for their parents to eventually come back. One day, a pirate woman comes to them and wants an item that they have. They don't fully understand the significance of this item and decide to barter it for passage on her ship. They have decided enough is enough. They are going to go out looking for their parents. This story was such a fast-paced adventure, and I loved the bond between Viola and Wilmer. They are the best of friends. I also found the world building incredibly inventive. The writing is very atmospheric and alternates between creepy and funny. I wrote down a description that literally made me laugh out loud. Archie Weir, a self-serious young man who had the world's tiniest pigtail and hated fun. So this is not a graphic novel, but I said that I would show you some of the pictures. I really adore his art style. This is part 1 of a duology, and the ending was a cliffhanger. I need resolution right now. I'm very impatiently waiting for part 2. I also really enjoyed the audiobook. The narrator was Ramon de Ocampo, and he did a great job distinguishing between the characters. I'll link my review in the cards and in the description if you want to hear more. At number 7, I'm putting My Government Means to Kill Me by Rashid Newson. I picked this up at a thrift store for a few bucks. I was initially interested in this because this is set in the 1980s and focuses heavily on the AIDS epidemic. This was a powerful debut about Trey. He is a young Black gay man who decides to leave the comforts of home, to move to New York City, and to really come into his own. He cannot afford much, and his apartment is basically just a squalid rat trap. And who is his landlord that lets it get into such filth and squalor? Why, it's the notorious slumlord Fred Trump. Trey does his best to not spend much time at the apartment, though, and frequents bathhouses regularly. I want to share a quote of him talking about the bathhouses. I'd found the haven for my mind, body, and soul. Everyone needs such a place. Don't reject the space you gravitate toward just because the windows aren't stained glass and the congregation isn't saved. So not only does he frequent the bathhouses for casual sex, but he also makes really long-lasting connections and relationships with people there. It's through these men that he first learns about the AIDS epidemic and joins the activist group ACT UP, which was co-founded by Larry Kramer. There is a ton of queer history in the footnotes, which really provided a lot of the background information that I needed. The title, My Government Means to Kill Me, refers to the fact that during the AIDS crisis, the government did nothing to protect these men because they were homosexual. Of course, we know that this disease didn't only affect homosexual men, but that didn't really matter. So Trey gets really involved in his activism and even starts to take care of men who are dying from this illness. Their family are ashamed of them. They don't want them, but these men need someone to help take care of them in their last days. I loved these characters, however deeply flawed they are, and I found the story incredibly moving. This is an intense coming-of-age story where he has to come to terms with his role in the midst of a political and social reckoning. I loved this so much, and I'm so glad this author is going to put out another book in 2026. At number 6, I put You Killed Me First by John Mars. This was a fast-paced thriller that just grabbed me by the throat and didn't let go. The book opens up with a woman suddenly coming to, realizing that she is bound and hidden within a giant bonfire. And it's Guy Fawkes night, so they are going to be lighting the bonfire very soon. A mysterious voice in her earbud tells her, "You deserve this because you killed me first." Who is she and what did she do? We then go back in time 11 months and focus on 3 women in a neighborhood. There is Margot, a former TV star who is incredibly nosy and judgmental. Anna, a pretty sweet woman who is very much a doormat and lets Margot walk all over her. And their newest neighbor, Liz. She's just moved in, recently coming into a great deal of money and feeling a little bit out of place. However, she can really hold her own against Margot, and I think the banter between the women was so fun to read. However, I wouldn't call them quite friends. I would call them probably frenemies. They all have secrets, and it was so fun watching all of this unravel. Who is the victim and who is the perpetrator? Tons of twists, and the audiobook was a full cast. There are 8 narrators, each a voice for the prominent characters. At number 5, The Wonder State by Sarah Flannery Murphy. This is a small town mystery with some paranormal elements. Shortly after a woman, Brandy, goes missing, her 5 high school friends all come back to the small town of Eternal Springs, beholden to a promise they made her. The story is told in 2 timelines. We get flashbacks to when they all became friends back in high school and what it was that really united them. There are local legends of some magical houses, and they are united in their quest to find them. We also get the present timeline where they're trying to figure out what happened to Brandy. The cops are very suspicious of these 5 showing back up because Brandy's disappearance hadn't even been announced yet. How did they know she had gone missing? They all have secrets that they are desperate to conceal. The story unfolds in such a fun way with twists and turns. This was a page turner, and I did not want to put it down. I thought the paranormal elements were incredibly inventive, and I loved the setting of Eternal Springs. It was very clearly modeled on Eureka Springs, Arkansas, which is a place where I used to live, and it was fun seeing the Easter eggs and all of the little hidden gems that you would only know about if you were really familiar with the town. It is most assuredly an underrated gem. At number 4, I am placing Affinity by Sarah Waters. I cannot believe I haven't talked about this book yet because I loved it so much. Sarah Waters has published 6 books, and this was the last book I had left to read before I had finished her backlist. This is her darkest book yet, and it was perfect reading in autumn. We get a gothic story of obsession, atmospheric writing, and 2 very fascinating characters, Margaret Pryor and Selena Dawes. Margaret Pryor is an upper-class woman who has been having a very difficult time since her father died. Someone recommends that she volunteer at Millbank Prison as a lady visitor. She's meant to be a good example and to give the prisoners the desire to change their ways and to live honestly. The book is mostly comprised of her diary entries of writing about her experiences volunteering at the prison. Let me give you an example of how vivid her writing is. Doorway after doorway after doorway, all just the same, like the dark, identical doorways one sometimes has to choose between in terrible dreams. The doorways let a little light into the passage, but also something of an odor. The odor, I had caught it at once in the outer corridors and smell it even now as I write this. It is vague, but terrible. It is the stifled reek of what they call their nuisance buckets, and the lingering exhalations, I suppose, of the many ill-washed mouths and limbs. She describes the scenes so vividly, calling upon most of our senses to really get a feel for how dank and terrible this prison was. And it is there she meets a woman prisoner, Selena Dawes. Selena is a spiritualist and was arrested when a seance went horribly wrong and an elderly lady died. At first, Margaret visits with many of the women. The women view this as kind of a highlight to their otherwise dark days. But she quickly becomes entranced with Selena and starts spending a lot of her time with her. Margaret does not really believe in Selena's abilities. Does she really have the gift? I loved both Margaret and Selena, and their relationships gets pretty intense. You won't want to put it down for anything. Oh, and that ending, oh, such a gut punch. Oh my gosh, that ending. Loved it. It did not unseat Fingersmith as my favorite book, but it did come in as a very close second. On top of that, the audiobook was fantastic. It was narrated by one of my favorite narrators, Juanita McMahon, and I think she did an excellent job in transporting me to London. She also narrates 2 other of Sarah Waters' books, Tipping the Velvet and Fingersmith, which happen to be my top 3 favorites. In the 3rd spot, I am putting more than one book. I have recently discovered that I think Robert Jackson Bennett is one of my favorite authors. And of course, I couldn't decide. So I'm going to put all of the books that I read by him in this spot. It may be cheating, but it's my channel. I can do what I want. So I read A Drop of Corruption by him this year, which is an Anna and Din mystery. So it's a Sherlock and Watson retelling within a magical walled city. I loved the characters so much. The world building is excellent, and the mystery was very intriguing and complex. I desperately am excited for the third book in the series, which doesn't come out until much later this year. So I decided to go back into his backlist and start the Divine City trilogy. I buddy read the first book, City of Stairs, with Audrey from Audrey Approved, and we loved it so much. We both gave the first book 5 stars and decided we had to binge the entire trilogy together. So, the first book, City of Stairs, is also a mystery fantasy genre blend. We are following Shara. She is looking into the suspicious death of Dr. Penguin. Turns out he had uncovered some very big secrets, and Shara and her bodyguard, Sigurd, get pulled into this complex political conspiracy. That's all I'll say about the plot, but I thought the world building was really top-notch as well. The land used to be ruled by the divinities, but the Kaj then kills the divinities. The magic system is very interesting and unique and really added a lot to my enjoyment. In the first book, we are following Shara. The subsequent 2 books follow Sigurd and Mulagesh, one character who becomes really prominent in this first book. I thought it was going to be my favorite series that I started this year. But as you'll see from spot number 2, that was not the case. I found a series I loved even more. And that starts with The Stranger Times by C.K. McDonald. So this is a paranormal mystery series. I was looking for more fantasy mystery genre blends, and I picked this up on the recommendation of Danni over at Danni Dabbles. I'll link her. They run kind of a paranormal tabloid that talks about the supernatural, stuff that may or may not be true. But magic is definitely real. We get some Pratchett-esque kind of humor, both absurd and a biting satire. And we get the most immensely talented audiobook narrator that just elevated this to favorite of all time. Oh, which all adds up to the best series I started this year. So each book have kind of an overarching mystery, but there are also longer term arcs throughout the series. So in this first one, we are following Hannah. She is leaving her cheating husband and needs a job. Any job. She's not picky. So she decides to interview for the assistant editor position at the Stranger Times. While it's a hilariously disastrous interview, she does get the job. Tragedy strikes on her first week, and they find that something is killing people, something that isn't human. While the mystery plot is very intriguing, my favorite part are the characters and the found family that they form. There is Bancroft, the loud, brash, alcoholic editor who is equal parts hilarious and offensive. Even if this is just an often mocked paranormal tabloid, he has high journalistic standards and is an exacting boss. But there are layers. He is probably my favorite character. There is Stella, a mouthy teen who can be helpful when she wants to be. There's Grace, the religious and motherly office manager who is often at odds with Bancroft. There is Manny, the frequently stoned Jamaican man who runs the ancient printing press. And sometimes he forgets to wear clothes, which leads to some really awkward moments. We have Ox, who is a gambling addict, and Reggie, a usually mild-mannered man who, when we first meet him, is over-the-top hysterical. These 2 men couldn't be more different, but they get along really well. And I loved the sense of found family. These characters feel like real people. And as we go through the series, we get a few more recurring characters as well. So this is the first book. I have read the first 4 books and the short story collection that goes with it. I only have 1 book left, Ring the Bells, which is book 5, and is set during Christmas. I haven't decided if I want to just get to it right away or if I want to hold on to it and try to read it next Christmas. I probably won't be able to wait. I am obsessed with this series. I even signed up for the newsletter that gets me access to even more stories. which I have not started yet because they don't have an audiobook, but I plan to get to it as soon as my eyes allow. And speaking about the audiobooks, this was again a top tier audiobook. The narrator is Brendan McDonald, and he is amazing. The reason I think his narration is so superb is because of his incredible ability to do several accents. Bancroft is Irish. Stella and Manny are both Jamaican. Stella has a very posh London accent, and Ox has a Mancunian accent, which is notable because this is based in Manchester. The reason I know what a Mancunian accent sounds like is because I love Ted Lasso, and there is a character, Jamie, who is from Manchester and has a very distinct Mancunian accent. So that's the only reason I know the differences between some of them. So while I absolutely 100% recommend the audiobook, I had to have them in physical form too. And the reason is, in between some of the chapters, there are like snippets from the article that might have come out. They don't even necessarily have anything to do with the story, but really they're just funny satirical bits that made me laugh out loud. I'm going to share two with you. So this is what it looks like. Dawkins is God. A church has been formed in Lancaster based on the premise that well-known atheist Richard Dawkins is really the son of God. High priestess and part-time mobile hairstylist Veronica Clift, 41, says it makes perfect sense. Revelations clearly state that only 144,000 people can fit into heaven, and the divine Richard is doing everything in his power to get the numbers of true believers down to prevent crowding. Oh, just thought that was hilarious. And the other one I wanted to share is called Battered Sausage. Sharon Marmont, 23, from Essex, has been arrested for assaulting her former partner with a battered sausage. Ex-boyfriend Liam Wilson, 25, is a committed vegan, and calls have been made for the case to be dealt with as a hate crime. So, these books are fantastic. I can't recommend them enough. They are just so full of joy and humor, and yes, absolutely loved it. And we are finally to my number one spot. While The Stranger Times was an excellent book that made me laugh, my number one book made me cry, and that is the poetry collection You Better Be Lightning by Andrea Gibson. This blew me away. I thought I didn't really like poetry, and that maybe I wasn't even smart enough to get it, but Andrea's words somehow pierced my soul. I struggle with depression myself, and they felt very much like a kindred spirit. Poetry really is art, and good art moves you, and that is exactly what this poetry collection did. This is the most impactful poetry collection I've ever read. There is not a bad poem in the entire collection. I have rewatched their YouTube videos where they perform some of their poems multiple times, to the point that I'm actually starting to memorize some of them. I've never felt like this about poetry before. And so I recommend, even if you don't think you're a poetry reader, I still recommend you give it a try. My favorite poem is 3 pages long, so I'm only going to read a section of it, but I will make sure to link to their video where they perform this very poem. The poem is called Every Time I Ever Said I Want to Die. Forget them, and remember you can tell me anything about how hard it is to stop flirting with your expiration date. I understand being wooed by the finish line of sadness. Infinity still sends me nudes every day. I won't deny, she looks amazing, but I'm taken. My hand now promised to writing every page of my story, except for its end. Friend, you are who taught me that a difficult life is not less worth living than a gentle one. Joy is just easier to carry than sorrow. It is such a gorgeous and hopeful poem. It is even more impactful in its entirety, so definitely check out the video that I will link. I will also link my video where I talk about not only this collection, but another of theirs called Lord of the Butterflies. It's so good. I strongly encourage you to try it. Okay, so that was my 12 favorite books I read this year. Make sure to tell me if you have read any of the books that I talked about, or if you want to. And I'd love to hear your top 3 favorites that you've read this year. If you've made a video, feel free to link it. And if you haven't, feel free to just tell me in the comments. I, of course, will amass even more on my towering TBR. Thank you so much for joining me. Happy new reading year. Bye.